Right in the heart of Beijing, it was the home of emperors for 500 years. It has witnessed China's major political events during imperial times and ever since. The Forbidden City, its 900 halls and palaces, constitute the largest wooden building complex in the world. And its palace museum houses a vast collection of imperial artworks and artifacts from Ming and Qing times. Watch the Forbidden City on Journeys in Time.
In this room, an emperor admired paintings and works of calligraphy. "200 years ago, Emperor Qianlong would often sit in this small room of less than 6 square meters and quietly appreciate 3 works of calligraphy. They were Bo-Yuan script by Wang Xuan, Mid-Autumn script by Wang Xianzhi, and A Clear Sky After a Quick Snowfall by Wang Shiju. Emperor Qianlong regarded them as the most delicate among the huge collection of calligraphic works acquired by the Qing dynasty, and so he renamed this small room the Hall of 3 Treasures. This emperor brought the Qing court's collection of paintings and calligraphic works to a new height, creating a brilliant page in the history of paintings and calligraphic works in China. During his reign of more than half a century, Emperor Qianlong turned the imperial palace into the largest museum of paintings and works of calligraphy in China. Although many people of today may not be aware of it, some of the most precious works were stored here. Over a period of nearly 600 years, these works had carried forward the aesthetic values and concepts of the Chinese civilization. Emperor Qianlong's reign occurred during a flourishing age, and so his personal hobby resulted in an unprecedented gathering of paintings and works of calligraphy. In fact, during his 60-year reign, almost all the important artworks in the history of China eventually found their way into the Forbidden City. These most precious paintings and calligraphic works, which we can see today in the Palace Museum, are almost all available to us due to Emperor Qianlong's lifelong pursuit of collecting art.
知道吧？
The first batch of works to be collected in this imperial palace came from the court collection of the Yuan dynasty. The Ming dynasty took over all the things left behind by the former dynasty, and so all the precious paintings and calligraphic works of the Yuan imperial court bear the personal seal of their new masters. Zhu Yuanzhang, the founding emperor of the Ming dynasty, had no interest in paintings and calligraphic works. Li Gonglin, a famous painter in the Song dynasty, had created some truly wonderful paintings. Yet when the first Ming emperor commented on one of his paintings of horses, he could only say, "There are so many horses grazing on the outskirts. I wish they could bring benefits to later generations and safeguard the frontier." This emperor, who was good at riding horses and fighting, could appreciate only the practical use of horses. Basically, no active collecting efforts were made by the Ming court at all, although when the court convicted a minister of some offence or other, it would take possession of objects for the court's collection. The 10th year of the reign of Emperor Wan Li saw the death of Zhang Zhujiang, who had a large collection of paintings and calligraphic works. Emperor Wan Li was a rare eccentric, famous for his meanness and avarice, who, as the master of the country, was only interested in gold, silver, money and other valuables. When some of Zhang Zhujiang's political opponents began to expose his former wrongdoings and told the emperor that Zhang Zhujiang's wealth may well match that of the state, Emperor Wan Li ordered Zhang Zhujiang's house to be searched and his property confiscated. And so it was in this way that some very important paintings and calligraphic works owned by officials became part of the court collection, although the original intention had simply been to accomplish a transfer of wealth. Unfortunately, during the Ming dynasty, the court's collection of paintings and calligraphic works became smaller and smaller, as they were increasingly sold to pay soldiers and buy provisions.
因为已经到明末了，因为当时是两线作战，那么就是一个是要在国内来围剿这些起义军，那么在关外就要对满清来作战，所以呢，就是这个军饷就造成了国家的这国库是已经是非常空虚的。直到这个起义军围城的时候，崇祯他也是在《明记北略》这本书里记载。 他搜刮这个宫中，只搜刮了30万两来助饷。
By the time the last emperor of the Ming dynasty, Emperor Chongzhen, hanged himself at Meishan Hill, the forbidden city behind him was already an empty palace. The new master of the Forbidden City was from the north, but he soon found the Chinese culture he had inherited as its new ruler very interesting. During what was to be the flourishing age of this dynasty, Kangxi, who was an open-minded emperor, acquired profound knowledge of the culture of the Han ethnic group by gathering many Han civil officials around him, and he treated them with respect. One of them was named Gao Shiqi.
他在康熙周围呢，有时候呢，康熙有些地理这个知识啊，这个风俗人情啊，就要咨询他，他都能够很快的回答。康熙有些诗要做了以后，他可以来奉贺这些诗，所以很得康熙的这个欢喜。
Gao Shiqi was not only obsequious, but also shrewd, even daring to present forged paintings and calligraphic works to the emperor. The paintings and calligraphic works he presented to the emperor were recorded in one of his books entitled Jiang Tuan's Records in Summertime. In the record, Gao Shiqi describes characteristics pertaining to the appearance of each painting and calligraphic work in detail, but fails to mention if it was an original or not. Besides the published work Jiang Tuan's Records in Summertime, Gao Shiqi compiled another list of paintings and calligraphic works which bore the title Catalogue of Jiang Tuan's Calligraphic Works and Paintings.
另外一本是他自己这个私家这个珍秘的一个底账，它最重要的有2个内容，一个内容呢是说他对于这件藏品他自己的这个鉴定意见他是注明白的。那么第2点呢，就是这个东西是可以进献给皇帝的，还是说可以随便馈赠给亲戚朋友的，这也在这个东西边上都注出来的。
His intention in doing this was simple, to make it possible for these elaborate art forgeries to be presented to the emperor. The original masterpieces could then be retained in his own private collection. Ironically, however, after Gao Shiqi's death, his collection became part of the imperial court collection. It has to be said that his canniness in protecting his collection of art was very impressive, but in the end, his shrewdness could not win the advantage over time and imperial power. 32 years after Gao Shiqi's death, the grandson of Emperor Kangxi, Hongli, ascended the throne, and the title of his reign was Qianlong. Emperor Qianlong was certainly a match for Gao Shiqi in his zeal for paintings and works of calligraphy, but he had no idea that the works apparently signed by Wang Shizhi and Wang Xianzhi were in fact copies made during the Tang and Song dynasties. Only Bo Yuan script from the Eastern Jin period by Wang Xuan was an original. Like the 3 calligraphic works in the Hall of 3 Treasures, almost all the paintings and works of calligraphy were placed in danger in their history of 1,000 years or more, before finally becoming a part of the collection in the Forbidden City. And certainly, there had been some monumental disasters in the history of art collection in China. More than 1,400 years ago, during the southern and northern dynasties, Emperor Xiao Yi of the Liang regime was besieged in Jiangling city by troops from the Western Wei, and on the night before his surrender, he set fire to his collection of 140,000 pieces of art, a collection of the best paintings, calligraphic works and ancient books and records in China at the time. More than 1,300 years ago, Emperor Yangdi of the Sui dynasty decided to take a trip to Yangzhou along the Grand Canal, taking famous paintings and calligraphic works that he had collected in Luoyang with him in the boat. The boat capsized and more than half of the paintings and calligraphic works fell into the water. More than 800 years ago, when Jin troops captured Bianling, the collection of Emperor Huizong of the Song dynasty, a collection quite unprecedented, was scattered and lost. It is not at all difficult to understand why Emperor Qianlong appreciated these 3 rare model calligraphic works so much, and certainly we are fortunate to be able to see them today. For several thousand years, the fate of China's paintings and works of calligraphy was closely associated with the fate of China's supreme rulers and changes in power. We are fortunate to be able to see such works from 300 years ago in the Palace Museum. In the late Ming dynasty, when war began to break out in a number of places, many rare paintings and calligraphic works dating to before the Song and Yuan dynasties were scattered among the common people. By the time of the reign of Emperor Kangxi in the Qing dynasty, many of these important paintings and works of calligraphy were owned by just a small number of collectors. When Emperor Qianlong began to collect paintings and calligraphic works from the common people, he found that there were a huge amount of masterpieces ready for the taking. Before these paintings and calligraphic works became part of the court collection, their owners had made them their own by imprinting them with their personal seal. These seals recorded the fate of each of these works of art. This painting, entitled Cold Forest and Snow, was executed by Fan Quan, a master painter in the northern Song dynasty. In the past, it was part of the collection in the Forbidden City, but today it is the most valuable treasure in the Tianjin Museum. The painting had been passed among the common people before finally being collected by a wealthy salt merchant named An Qi in Tianjin during the reign of Emperor Kangxi. An Qi had made his fortune in the late years of the reign of Emperor Kangxi by selling salt. After he had collected enough ancient paintings and calligraphic works, he compiled a catalogue for his collection and named it A Collection of Fortunes in Ink. Judging from the notes in the book, the collection of An Qi featured a very large number of artworks, and the bulk of the collection consisted of old rare pieces by famous artists. By the early years of the reign of Emperor Qianlong, the salt fields in Tianjin had been moved away, and new salt merchants had taken the place of old salt merchants. The An family fell into decline. A large number of the fine paintings and works of calligraphy that had been collected by An Qi were bought by the court. Among the works in An Qi's collection, which became part of the collection of Emperor Qianlong, was one particular landscape painting that was very special because of an anecdote about it. This masterpiece by Huang Gongwang, a painter in the Yuan dynasty, is called Dwelling in the Fuchuan Mountains.
黄公望晚年的，他是最后一部作品。他最有名就是说，一个是元代的绘画对明清的绘画有特别大的影响，在元代绘画里面，黄公望又是首屈一指的。在黄公望的作品里边，这个《富春山居图》又是最好的。所以就像周之林他有一个题跋里边讲，他说黄公望的这个《富春山居》好比是那个王羲之的《兰亭序》。书法里面的《兰亭序》。
This painting that represented the zenith of Chinese painting was owned in turn by many people in the 300 years since it was created. In the late Ming dynasty, when a man named Wu Wenqing became its new owner, he was so delighted he could hardly bear to put it down. An annotation on the painting tells us that he took it with him when he had meals and when he slept. During the confusion of war, he abandoned all his property but took this painting with him when he fled his home. Wu Wenqing loved this painting so much, he even wanted to burn it before his death. Wu Wenqing was in the process of burning Dwelling in the Fuchuan Mountains, but then at this critical moment his nephew took it out of the fire. The masterpiece had been partially burned and was now in 2 parts. The 2 parts of Dwelling in the Fuchuan Mountains were mounted separately by the Wu family. One part was mounted as an independent painting and was called Leftover Mountain, and this is kept in the Zhejiang Provincial Museum. The other part, which was the main body of the original work, was mounted in a different way. In order to conceal traces of burn marks, the Wu family cut the annotation made by Dong Qichang from the lower part of the painting and transferred it to the upper part. And this is the Dwelling in Fuchuan Mountains as collected by Emperor Qianlong. While the Wu Yongshi copy is not the entire painting, it does retain the rich ink and the simple yet profound artistic conception of the entire work. This great masterpiece in the new style of Chinese landscape painting had changed hands many times before finally being bought by An Qi. After An Qi died, the so-called Wu Yongshi copy of Dwelling in the Fuchuan Mountains was presented to Emperor Qianlong in the winter of the 11th year of his reign. He had already collected a scroll that was known as Dwelling in the Fuchuan Mountains, the most famous fake Dwelling in the Fuchuan Mountains, referred to later as the Ziming copy. The painting, later to be known as the Ziming copy, was a copy of the so-called Wu Yongshi copy of Dwelling in the Fuchuan Mountains, and it was made by a painter in the late Ming dynasty. But with regards to this, Emperor Qianlong had remained in the dark. It is in fact not hard to detect some of the flaws in the Ziming copy. In the Yuan dynasty, the inscription of the painter was written in the background of a painting, but in the Ziming copy, the inscription is in the upper blank space. This is a placement that is not consistent with practice in the Yuan dynasty. But Emperor Qianlong's capacity for art appreciation was not advanced enough to detect such flaws, and he treasured this forged copy of Dwelling in the Fuchuan Mountains so much that even the appearance of the real work, the so-called Wu Yongshi copy, did not make him doubt his own wrong judgment. The emperor insisted that the original, the so-called Wu Yongshi copy, was a fake. He had, after all, bought it at a very high price. When he asked some of his ministers to watch him make annotations on the 2 parts of Dwelling in the Fuchuan Mountains, which he believed was a fake, his ministers flattered him on his love of art and his open-minded attitude towards the forgery of an artistic work. No one dared to tell him that the Wu Yongshi copy was in fact the original. Dwelling in the Fuchuan Mountains, collected by An Qi, became part of the court collection and was kept in the Palace of Heavenly Purity for more than 200 years. In 1933, it was moved to South China along with other cultural relics in a time of danger. These 2 parts of Dwelling in the Fuchuan Mountains, stored in the Palace Museum in Taipei, tell a story of the history of the collection of paintings and works of calligraphy in China. From 1799, when Emperor Qianlong died, his son, Emperor Jia Qing, accomplished almost nothing in terms of collecting paintings and works of calligraphy. This was partly because Emperor Jia Qing was not so artistically inclined as his father, but mostly because Emperor Qianlong had already collected almost all the best works in China that could be collected. In order to show that he valued his father's collection and cherished the memory of his father, Emperor Jia Qing decided to seal up all the paintings, calligraphic works and articles that had been so treasured by Qianlong for safekeeping. Most of Emperor Qianlong's collection was sealed up and stored by Emperor Jia Qing in Yanchuan Tower. Sadly, the original building was burnt down in a big fire in 1924, but we can learn about it from the writings of painters from those days. Although he had not inherited his father's interest in collecting works of art, Emperor Jia Qing nevertheless did preserve paintings and calligraphic works in Yanchuan Tower, and the famous Festival of Pure Brightness on the River was among them.
Right in the heart of Beijing, it was the home of emperors for 500 years. It has witnessed China's major political events during imperial times and ever since. The Forbidden City, its 900 halls and palaces, constitute the largest wooden building complex in the world. And its palace museum houses a vast collection of imperial artworks and artifacts from Ming and Qing times. Watch the Forbidden City on Journeys in Time.